On the other end of the phone is Jack Utzik. He's calling me from the Miami Federal Correctional Institute, a low-security prison about 40 minutes drive from Miami Beach, near the zoo, and opposite one of Florida's famously generic aging street malls. Jack is serving an 18-year sentence for orchestrating a $280 million Ponzi scheme. For many years, before he was caught, this guy funded the Australian tours of some of the biggest music acts in the world. The whole idea of listening to departing employees is foolish. I've never understood why companies set such store by exit interviews. They tell themselves that ex-workers are somehow free to tell the truth, when they are actually just as constrained as current employees, only the constraints are different. When you are in a job, you don't say what you really think because you want to keep the paychecks coming in. But when you are walking out the door, you also fail the truth test just as reliably. We've all seen it in the movies. After doing long hard years in prison, a man finally walks free. He steps outside, the sun on his face, the wind in his hair, ready to start over. A new beginning. A new life. The reality of getting out of prison can be very different. If you don't have anyone to pick you up, you might get a transport voucher. If you don't have anywhere to go, you might be given $275, 2 nights in a motel and one set of clothes, that's it. There are more people in prison in Australia than ever before. Right now, that's more than 40,000 people. If you take the official figures, that's 40% more than 6 years ago. Over half of patients had what we called a no symptoms, no asthma health belief. They thought about and managed their asthma as an acute episodic illness, the way someone would treat a cold or the flu. They felt when they had the wheezing or shortness of breath, that's when they had their asthma, and it made perfect sense for them to use the quick relief medicines and their chronic control of medicines then, but once they started feeling better they felt there was no reason for using those medicines because they felt 0k. I agree. I think that it does need some mass action by people to change their habits, and to apply pressure to governments. And there's a message here, not just for those students who will enroll for the course, but I think for everybody that will listen to this album. This is a problem that affects every single one of us. It's not going to go away, there's a huge problem, and I think that we all have a role to play in addressing this problem. The whole idea of listening to departing employees is foolish. I've never understood why companies set such store by exit interviews. They tell themselves that ex-workers are somehow free to tell the truth when actually they're just as constrained as current employees. Only the constraints are different. When you're in a job, you don't say what you really think because you want to keep the paychecks coming in. But when you're walking out the door, you also fail the truth test just as reliably. Birds actually evolved after mammals, approximately 50 to 100 million years after mammals. So, mammals are actually older than birds. Mammals actually didn't even evolve from reptiles, they evolved from a stem amniote ancestor, and reptiles also evolved from a stem amniote, amphibian-like ancestor, so we have to get rid of this idea of mammals being more advanced than birds and so forth. All that has to be thrown out the window. On a tour of Spain, in 1912, a fellow traveler introduced Holst to astrology. And he became so curious that sowed the seeds of his spectacular orchestral suite, the Planets, his most popular if not most representative of creation, which portrays the astrological rather than the mythological characters of 7 planets in our solar system. Jupiter, the bringer of jollity, has both of its jovial feet planted firmly on the ground. Well, it's a contested concept, and like many contested concepts, I think you can identify an agreed upon core and then a sort of contested penumbra. I think that perhaps the agreed upon core might be this: it's something held at once by academics and by academic institutions, and it is something like a privilege of freedom in the way in which the conduct of teaching and research is undertaken. When you get hired somewhere, think about the company and think about the culture. Does it match who you are? For me, I loved aviation and I decided this is where I belonged. But the culture where I was didn't exactly match what I wanted to do. I'm not saying that a culture is good or bad because you can think of culture in terms of countries. You can think of culture in terms of parts of the country, East Coast versus West Coast. I'm a West Coast person. That is also part of my culture piece, which was also a bit of a challenge because where I ended up was on the East Coast.